look like it's
Okay.
automatically recording. Maybe it only automatically records in certain channels.
Oh yeah, that is correct. Okay, it is recording now.
Okay, cool. So I actually wrote an outline of how to show someone MarginNote. So I could just go through this and you could ask me questions as I go.
Oh yeah, that would be amazing.
And then we could show this to everyone. Cool. Okay, so MarginNote has two main important views and then a third one you can optionally use if you don't like Anki. So you've got the document browser, right? Each of these are individual PDFs. You've got the study browser. Each of these are collections of PDFs, and a collection is accompanied by one gigantic mind map. And mind maps can have nested mind maps. I'll explain more of that later. And then you've got the review view, where you can actually look at flashcards from your mind maps. So you can turn an individual node in a mind map into a flashcard where the front of the card is the title and the back of the card is the content of the node, which is kind of cool. I've been experimenting more with this feature. I kind of like it. The reason I like it is because if I can't remember a flashcard, I can zoom directly to the spot in the mind map, get a bunch of like surrounding context from that flashcard I forgot. And each of those nodes are connected to the spot in the original document. So I can actually go right to the PDF where I originally learned about the thing. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
So the first thing you care about is getting a PDF into MarginNote. So you can add documents from Finder, self-explanatory. I only use PDFs and EPUBs. You can add web pages. So here's one I recently added. Basically, you have a little browser here. Whoop. Nice, MarginNote crashed. That's hilarious. Okay, you have a little web browser here, and you can push download, and it will appear in MarginNote. So you can see that the title of this document is Neural Architecture Search plus a UUID, and it now appears up here. Now, I think I already added this one somewhere, but anyway. So this web page was conveniently named so that I can easily identify the document later. This one is what it looks like to download something straight from archive. It's like terribly named. Really, the name of this is action and perception is divergence minimization. And so because I downloaded that straight from archive, I'll probably come back and like rename this here. This is obviously pretty annoying.
Yeah.
A better flow is add a PDF into Zotero, because Zotero has options for like renaming PDFs well. And then you can Command O from Zotero, and this will open in MarginNote. And opening something in MarginNote, if you make MarginNote your default PDF reader, automatically imports it with a really nice name.
Okay.
Assuming it was named, the file is named well. Cool. So that's adding documents. Now, study maps, you can create a new mind map. These are called notebooks, I guess. So you create a notebook, and then once you've created a notebook, then you can include documents in it by coming into this manage view. What the hell? MarginNote crashed again?
Does this happen often?
No, it doesn't. That was weird. Okay, so I opened another notebook that's smaller. Maybe this will help. So this notebook already has 13 documents in it. And then here are the rest of the documents in my library that I could add to this. So here is a review on deep learning techniques for video prediction. Because I pushed the plus down here, it was added to my notebook. And now I can see it in my tab browser up here in the notebook. These are all of the documents in this notebook. These are all different PDFs.
Is there any way to find one if you know it by name or something?
Yes.
In those
so you can,
tabs?
Yeah, so you can come here and you can like find it by name here. So that was
Okay.
the manage view. You can also search for documents in your library as well. So I've got two more Danny Jar Hafner papers that I haven't added to this notebook. I don't actually want this paper in my notebook. Cool. So that's adding documents to notebooks. when you create a highlight in a notebook, only in a notebook, it's added automatically to your mind map. There are different settings for where it will be added. By default, I think the node insertion position, so this is like where it puts highlights into your mind map, is grouped by table of contents. You can also group it by document, and you can also just have nodes added to whatever your most recently selected mind map position was. So, I could select here, and now all of my highlights, no matter the document, will be added to this node.
Okay.
A node has a title and contents that you can edit. They also each point to a highlight if they were created from a highlight, or if you push plus out here, well, then this is just a new node that doesn't point to a highlight. And so you can build mind maps like just as you would with any other mind map editor.
Okay.
Mind maps are collapsible. Sometimes I use this when the mind map is getting like too large, so I could collapse everything at this node. Now it's easier to see where I am for the rest of the mind map. I think for highlighting, you notice that I've got lots of different colors of highlights here. I have like a little color code. Green is like papers I want to follow up on later. Yellow is just like generic highlights, like useful things. And red is like main points, but you can invent your own system. Whenever you highlight something, you can choose any color from this color palette. Cool. So that's the notebooks. And with that, you have basically the overview of MarginNote. Like that's basically it. You just add documents to the document browser, and then you add those to notebooks so that you can study them together and create mind maps that sort of collect all their ideas into one general structure. And that by itself is really useful. Now there's a ton of other features. There's a research browser. There's a couple of gotchas. And then I can show you the lit review flow that I started with Abe and then, have like refined since.
Okay,
So,
I have a quick question first. You said that there's you made these different views, which really cool, like 4 different views of the map. How do you do that?
So, okay, so this is an advanced notebook feature that I only recently discovered, actually. MarginNote is made by these like Chinese developers, and I think Chinese apps have a philosophy of just stuffing a lot of features in without really like making them obvious or intuitive to the user. And so I'm still like discovering new MarginNote features, but basically you have the main mind map view. So what you can do is you can create a new child mind map. So this will be example. And now I've got this pop-up here where I can drag all of this content into the mind map, and it's basically a copy operation to move this into this notebook. And now when I come here to main mind map, I can see example and switch my view to this. And now I can manipulate all of these without having to worry about destroying the original nodes that they were created from. This little triangle icon means it's basically a symlink. And so if I deleted this, well, there's some original reference to this node that still exists. And so you can see the references. These are other places where this exact note exists, right? So the reference note is originally in some other mind map. And I just zoom to it, and I'm now in the main mind map. It's a very confusing feature. You don't need to worry about actually navigating between references very often. Just know that it's safe to like manipulate child mind maps. Okay, so I'm gonna delete that.
Yeah, cool.
So the way I actually used this was when I was doing a lit review, I collected a ton. Yes, all of these notes are from this one document. And that was the one I did, one of the ones I did a hot tub on. Okay, so basically my lit review flow is I start with one paper, and I explore the citation graph. So here's a cool paper, or here's a cool paper, whatever, they're all cool. And I explore the citation graph. And I pull papers that look interesting into Zotero. And then from Zotero, because they've been renamed nicely, I open them in Mendeley, and then I add them to this notebook through this manage menu. And I just collect a bunch of interesting looking papers into here. Oh, actually, you know what? There's a step. Sorry. The first thing I do is I'm just only in Zotero, and I create a library. So here's the video prediction library. You know, I originally did this in Mendeley, not Zotero, so I don't have actually the original references here, but it would work the same here. Basically, I start with a cool paper. I go read it. I look up all the interesting references. When I was doing it for video prediction, Abe and I collected about 50 or 60 papers in here. And then I picked the top 20% of those papers, and I brought those into MarginNote, and I started grouping them in different interesting ways, and reading them and summarizing them. And that was really helpful. There's more to this process. I'm just giving you the high level, but the MarginNote feature that's relevant for this is, okay, here's like the 20 or 30 like interesting papers that made that cut that I thought were worth actually reading a little bit more deeply. And now what I've done is, okay, well, what sort of high level structure unites all of these papers? Like, along what interesting dimensions do all these papers vary? Well, one is that I've noticed that some of them have like impose a lot of priors. They encode a lot of priors in the network architectures, and some don't, right? Some are very like generic. And so that might be an interesting thing to write a blog post about. It's like all of the different priors encoded by video prediction papers. But I have another idea too, like, you know, maybe, you know, some have really interesting latent dynamics models and some don't. That's another way that they vary. Now, when you add a PDF into a notebook, it creates a node for the paper. So this is actually a node group, and highlights, assuming that they're grouped by table of contents, highlights on that PDF will appear inside this node grouping, which is different from creating a mind map, right? When you drag nodes on top of each other, normally they fall into mind map structure, but when you drag nodes into a node group, they actually just become a child of the node group, right? And so by default, when you add a PDF to MarginNote, it'll create a node group for that paper so that your highlights for that paper are automatically grouped by that paper. Does that make sense? So you can see a bunch of other like node groups here, one for each of the PDFs that I've put into this MarginNote notebook. Let me clean that up real quick. We'll delete these notes. Now I can remove this. Cool. Okay, so back to the original problem. I can't classify all of these node groups that correspond to individual papers in multiple different ways. Well, you can if you make a different mind map for each of these classifications. So here's a child mind map into which I dragged all 40 of those node groups, right? I copied them by dragging them into a new child mind map. And now I've classified them in a different mind map. So this is feature engineering on the input space. You know, these papers all disentangled discriminators. These are like GAN related video prediction papers. In this one, we've got disentangled encoders. That was kind of cool. And so you can see I've got this neat classification scheme, and it's sort of like the blog post could write itself. Like, here's a bunch of intro, good notes from like very different papers. Like, all of these are from totally different PDFs.
Yeah, this is amazing because I also have not seen many blog posts that actually do interesting groupings of different papers or organizing them any of these ways. So I think
yeah, the inspiration for this comes from Lillian Wang's blog posts, which are basically only grouping papers by, like, she basically just finds interesting papers and then groups them in an interesting way. And so here I've got you know, some group of 40 interesting papers and 4 different interesting ways to group them. Right, so here's a way to group them by dynamics models. You can see that I've just started this one, but here we've got RSSMs. Here we've got a paper about GANs. There's lots more. Basically, some really simple ones of LSTMs. Here's ones that are autoregressive that are about transformers, right? This one was kind of a failed classification scheme, but I don't really care because it doesn't, affect. It's not messing up my original mind map. And that's basically the walkthrough.
Cool. This is a very good way to do research.
Yeah,
Seems
I like it a
more
lot.
sophisticated than anything that I've read about or tried to find on YouTube.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad that you asked me about it because I was meaning to record this for a long time. I just never got around to it.
Yeah, cool. I will ask more questions once I actually try to do anything in MarginNote probably, but it makes sense now.
Great. Yeah, there's a bunch of confusing usability quirks. I can actually just introduce you to a few right now. One is this syncs via iCloud. I have an iPad that I do most of my reading on now because I've actually really started to enjoy doing most of my reading in MarginNote, right? So here's a PDF for the elephant in the brain. Actually, this one's about social status. So I found some cool websites on social status and I added 6 of them. Here's one on scaling laws and AI timelines. So this one actually has a ton of different websites and papers in it, 21, right? And so here's a paper called Scaling Laws for Autoregressive Generative Modeling. And this is grouped. So you know how you can make a few nodes. So here's node 1. Here's node 2. You can actually create node groups even if they're not from a paper or in the same paper by dragging and selecting multiple nodes and then clicking regroup down here. And now this is like, new group. And so I've done that for a few different broad categories. Here's 3 papers about scaling laws for transfer, measuring the algorithmic efficiency of neural networks. Here's a bunch of papers on safety, plus some websites on safety. So there's really good blog posts out there on Less Wrong about AI safety. And you can clip websites into MarginNote as well. And now that I've got them all grouped, I can compare and contrast many different perspectives at once, which I really love. And the way that you do that,
to do any reading not in MarginNote? Do you do any reading not in MarginNote anymore?
yeah, if the website is interactive or if it has GIFs, then those won't import well into MarginNote. The way to get a website into MarginNote is to do import documents, add web pages. And then once you're here, well, usually I'll be I've come to great or wrong. And I find some interesting, types of generalism. I love this website. Maybe we can find them from the alignment form. All right, updating on the lottery ticket hypothesis. So now I get this URL and I paste that into here and I visit that in the research browser and then I push download and that will automatically add this page into MarginNote. And so I'll do that a lot. I'll see an interesting post and I'll just add it to my MarginNote for the relevant mind map notebook. As you can see here, I've got questions about AI safety, right? How should we think about AI timelines? What do other experts think? What beliefs underlie short versus long timelines? What impact will AI have on the world in the next 5 or 10 years? Well, here's 2 relevant highlights. This one is Moore's Law for Everything by Sam Altman. Looks like I got a bunch of interesting highlights from that. But here's how will we know when we're in a scaling regime? Well, here's a relevant detail to that, which is an upper bound on how much compute is available and what that means for whether we have AGI. At some upper bound, it's virtually guaranteed we have AGI with current technology, or at least so would this post would argue so. And then there's other cruxy questions that I'm trying to answer from this collection of posts and web pages and papers. But I have this for a lot of stuff, man. I've moved most of my reading into this flow. Here's one about effective altruism that I've been curious about. I just started. Yeah.
Oh, do you have videos as well? Is that a video that you had there?
So it's actually a transcript of a TED Talk.
Ah, okay.
So what I could do is, that would be this one. When you click on a node, there's a variety of options. This is edit the node, change the color of the highlight. I don't use the tags feature. You can cut and copy and paste. This is add to a review. So this is the flashcards feature that MarginNote has built in. So you can add it to one of your card decks. And then because this one doesn't have a title, the card wouldn't have a front, but it still would be able to add. You can delete it. This link is related to that symlinks feature that I don't use very often. Focus means that it will hide everything else, and now it'll make a breadcrumb for you, so you can come back up to the main mind map. And the research means it'll basically turn this into a Google search in the research browser. And so one thing you can do is, if you're on a video page, you can research. Usually it'll find, so it didn't do a very good job this time, but if I just am on my iPad, for example, and I change this Google search, well, now I could find the original TED link via Google, and inside this browser, I'm pretty sure videos work. I'd be able to do that. It's a terrible flow for taking notes on videos, honestly.
Yeah, makes sense. But I don't think there's anything better for taking notes on video anyway.
Yeah, that's why you can use like YouTube and Roam, but I agree it's not good. Cool. Any other questions?
No, I think that's all.
Cool. Well, thanks for the nudge.
Yeah, thank you for doing this and sharing it. I think
Yeah.
it sounds like it will be very useful. I just need to make it a habit and actually do it. But
Well, I like collecting things and documenting them, so for me it's easy. But yeah, I meant to. We should share this with Abe in particular. Wanted to hear more about MarginNote. Cool.
yeah,
Hi,
cool.
man.
I'll post
See you in Gather.
yeah,
Oh,
I'll post the link once it's done uploaded.
perfect. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
See ya.